Bear Down Bears fans, another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast coming your way from Halas Hall. We got Courtney Cronin on the show. I'm Pat the Designer, back at it again. Got to react to OTAs, Courtney. We saw a little bit of a bounce back today from the offense, so some excitement there. And because of the time we recorded with Yurko yesterday, we didn't get to talk about all the Hard Knocks stuff. We got to hear from the coaches and players on their thoughts on Hard Knocks. We got to break all of that down on today's episode. How are you? How are you feeling today?
I'm good. I mean, it's weird having OTAs on a Friday. I don't know if I've ever been up here during the spring for an OTA practice, but they're through 6 right now. They go into mandatory minicamp Tuesday through Thursday. They let the vets go, and then they'll have one final OTA practice that we're allowed to be at. They'll have their, I believe, remaining 3 the week of June 12th. And then they break for summer, and then they're right back here at the end of July.
It's going to be so interesting just coming up with content throughout that time. Mm-hmm. But at a minimum right now, we got a lot of excitement, I think, today. A lot more excitement than maybe people were expecting from what we saw that first game. And the word that I used is the offense just looked a lot more comfortable today at OTAs. I thought that when we saw Caleb out there, of course, some people missing that are very important people on the defensive side, but it looked like Caleb had definitely taken a little bit of a jump in his offensive, in his grasp of the offense that they're doing.
I think the progress that you're seeing there, at least what Matt Eberflus pointed out, was that the footwork has gotten better, which of course, that's one of the things that, it's hard for us to see from our vantage point on the sideline. We don't have the high up view of what his footwork looks like. We don't have the knowledge of what the coaches are asking him to do versus what he had been doing. But to hear that it's gotten better from every single day this week, that's a sign of progress as Caleb's trying to learn this offense and trying to put it all together to where his footwork marries the drop back, marries where the receivers are in their route progression and when he should be releasing the ball. I mean, hell, that's something we heard a lot about last year with Justin Fields, the footwork, and the footwork wasn't on time. And those things are very important to focus on right now. So it allows you to do different things to actually take a step into the offense and master the scheme when they're out there, 7-8 weeks from now. 42 days they'll have in between the time that mini camp ends and time that training camp starts. There's a lot for him that he's going to have to work on his own when he's working with his own quarterbacks coach, when he's training on his own, that he now should be getting to a point of being comfortable with it, so that it's not going to all feel foreign and it's not going to feel like he's starting completely over when they get to training camp. But I think his throws were on time today. He looked much better in 7-on-7. Granted, there wasn't as heavy of an emphasis on the red zone as we saw last week, but all of these things are checking the boxes of what the Bears have told us they expect from Caleb Williams at this stage, and they're not putting the expectations at this astronomical level. It's simple, basic things in the long run that certainly are not simple to just get at your first try at it, but it's a good spot for them to be in. And I think just for the offense to have a day where, they feel like they walk off this field feeling pretty good, even though, as you mentioned, most of the starting secondary wasn't here today. It's still early on to where you want to make sure you're getting those reps in and making sure they're clean reps at that.
Yeah, I think we saw some really good things out of the 7-on-7. I thought he, like you said, he looked on time. Mm-hmm. He just looked comfortable. He looked like, okay, I know where my receiver is going to be. It seems like there's more of a comfortability with which receiver he's throwing to. When he was throwing to DJ, it seemed like I know how he's going to break out of this route. Boom, here's the ball to him. He had a deep shot down the right sideline to Rome, ended up being a pass interference call. But I thought that it was a really good throw, good ball placement. If that's an NFL game, it probably would have been a pass interference call because we know how they favor the offense. But realistically speaking, he put the ball in the one spot that Rome could get it and nobody else could. So I feel like he's getting the timing down a lot better as we get
good
there.
Anticipation throws. I think there was one over the middle to DJ Moore during 7-on-7 that stood out to me. And I guess if we're looking at keeping stats today, we were just talking about this in the media room. So there's 3 periods of 7-on-7, and there were 5 opportunities for him, 5 in a row. So he went 13 of 15, I think was the official count of what he did against no pass rush in a 7-on-7 environment, which, keep all of that, take a grain of salt with that. But it is good to see the timing on those throws, like you mentioned, and where he's syncing up with receivers, at what are they at the top of their route, when they're catching the ball? How do they look? Like, for Rome Odunze, I felt like DJ Moore was kind of his security blanket today, which we saw this with Justin Fields last year, where those two, like Fields really locked in on DJ early on, and he's got that ability about him as that quarterback best friend sort of receiver that he is. He's becoming that very quickly for Caleb Williams. Keenan Allen wasn't out there, so we'll get a chance during mandatory minicamp to see what it looks like when they have all three of them together. But I think if you're hitting your top two targets, there's nothing to complain about there, whether it's in a team period, whether it's just 7-on-7 without a pass rush and an offensive line. I think that that's something that no matter what time of year that's happening, you're going to feel pretty good about.
DJ Moore, I said this when I was kind of just talking with Herb over on the sideline. I was like, he's not that much taller than me. DJ's probably an inch, maybe two taller than me.
6'2".
When I tell you the catch radius on DJ, because there was one pass that Caleb wasn't woefully behind him, but threw it a little bit behind DJ, and just reaching back in the air. He's such an amazing specimen on this team. Like, every time I see him on the field, I'm just like, how is he here? Like, what a trade by Ryan Poles. Like, I clap it up every time I see him. But the one thing that I thought was interesting to note is, you mentioned it as well, the people who weren't here. And that does make a difference, right? Like, I love the fact that the offense was there, and there were some jokes going around, and, maybe to help the offense feel a little better, they told these guys to stay home. Flus said that's not the case. This wasn't a day off of school. But who were the names that you noticed that were missing today?
Yeah, so Keenan Allen has not been here the last two times that we have seen OTAs, which was last Thursday and then today. Flus said that, like, they're not going to tell you why guys aren't here. Like, for most of the secondary wasn't here today. So that's Jalen Johnson. That was Kyler Gordon, Jaquan Brisker, Kevin Byard wasn't there as well.
Yeah.
Montez Sweat was not there as well. I do know that Jalen Johnson does have his celebrity golf outing. It's like, a lot of NBA players, a lot of NFL players that are expected to be in attendance, Montez Sweat being one of those guys. So I think that that's a big portion of why they weren't here today. I don't know if you can be upset with players for not being here. This is a voluntary off-season program, which could very well change, which I thought was interesting when the players were bringing up, when we asked them about the changes to the off-season and doing away with OTAs and effectively having that 6-week ramp-up period. Maybe they'll like it, maybe they won't. But until that changes, expecting these absences and working through them is just something that you have to do.
Yeah.
And next week we'll get a chance to see, okay, if somebody's not here next week, that's a mandatory fine from the team that doesn't just go away miraculously. Like, we used to see these things when there were contract disputes or somebody waiting out a new deal, and then they would not show up and the team would just forgive the fine, and that would go into training camp too. That's not the case anymore. So if there isn't somebody here next week, then that's when you can legitimately get concerned about it. But for right now, it's just a matter of guys have other things going on. And I think for Jalen Johnson, it's, his golf outing for the foundation that he has in honor of a friend that passed away a few years ago.
Yeah, and he missed this time last year, and I did miss the first week last year, but he was here the first week, went to his golf tournament.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're not worried about that situation anymore. Montez is already paid, so I don't think that we're worried about that anymore. I think really the only one is
said that he hasn't been here. Like, I don't think he's been here at all, just from what I gathered from Flus, because we were talking about his, the offseason conditioning that they have asked him to do, or at least like things that they're putting him in position for. He said, well, he hasn't been here, but he did say that the guys who are not here are in constant communication with him, which is something that they don't have to do. So I think that probably speaks to, what they're expecting next week, that there aren't going to be any sort of notable absences that are just like completely like, that you weren't expecting on your radar.
And of the guys who aren't here, the two guys that are the big names and that are the guys we're least worried about. I know Keenan Allen knows how to work his way into an offense. I know Montez Sweat is going to be the key cog on this defense. We watched him basically come over to the Bears last season. It was just like, no practice. No, all right, like, I'm here. Where do you need me? I go stand on that corner, get to the quarterback, and he finds a way to get a sack. So I'm not as worried about it. I'm not really worried about any of the names that haven't showed up here.
I do think that, there's a legitimate thing though, like,
with Keenan.
This is a rookie quarterback. This is not somebody that you've played with before. It's not somebody that's played with you before. Not saying that they aren't going to just like sync up right away, but you would like to believe that the more time you do that, like the more time you have on task of doing that, it's going to be a better product much sooner than having to like wait out the process of, okay, like what is mandatory minicamp going to look like next week? I'm not at all saying that I don't think that they can get on the same page right away, but it's to the benefit of your quarterback to have the pieces he needs around him.
I wonder, like, this is I wonder if they're just ducking the days when we're here, because we saw a video get released of Caleb working with all of his receivers, and Keenan Allen was in there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just there's 2 days that he wasn't here, and I'm not.
And it's the days
like,
that we haven't been here.
And like you just would like to believe that they are going to be able to make up that time however they can, whether it is some throwing sessions that they'll have on the side. When we do hear from Caleb Williams, which I expect will be during mini camp next week, I'm curious, is he going to do what Justin did, in previous years where they had all the guys come down to Atlanta and they all worked together during the offseason? Is he going to arrange another workout? Like he did it before the draft with these 3. So I would imagine they probably will have some plan to meet up at some point to get some work in outside of being here.
No, for sure. I think that it's going to be mandatory. I would be surprised if we see anybody not come, and Flus kind of echoed that sentiment. He's, like you said, he's been in constant communication, and I mean, for the most part, we've seen pretty good turnout the couple of days we've been here at OTAs. From today, what's your big takeaway from today? Of course, nothing crazy in OTAs, but what's your big takeaway from what you saw today?
Just a better day for the offense, and I think that that's necessary if you want to have confidence in this group going forward. And it is so early, but you can't understate or overstate the importance of watching them build this together to make sure that okay, what are the checkpoints for this unit? And it's not going to be something that's a matter of like, well, Caleb has to be perfect when he comes back. There will still be a learning curve for him, but it gives you an idea when you're watching out there. All right, what did he struggle with the first time we saw him? Like that was probably his first red zone practice that he's had, because that was the 3rd day of OTA practices. They typically don't do red zone until later in the week. They're not going to start with that. So maybe it was a bad day that we were like, for us to have been out there when he's getting his feet wet with something that he had never done before.
Right.
So like next time we see red zone, what does that look like? What does the execution look like? What does the timing look like? Those are the things that I think you can get a feel for in mandatory camp. And then when like the team comes back together during training camp, of course, there'll be a couple days where they're, ramping up, trying to get ready to go. Like when they're in pads, how quickly are they able to like establish a precedent of, okay, this is our baseline? Because then you can start to trace back to where in the spring it looked like he started to put it together. And there will still be things in training camp that I'm sure are very difficult for the offense that they're going to have to like master, but you're just starting to like lay the foundation and find like what boxes need to be checked. It's less than of like, all right, well, how did this throw look to this receiver? Like, is he throwing to guys that aren't going to be on the team? Like gauging all of those things versus like the overall operation. And like today, for example, when there was a period during team when it ended up being like, he's trying to draw the defense off sides. I don't know what down it was. They didn't have it, it wasn't situation. They didn't have it up on the scoreboard, but you could tell from this defense, they weren't buying it. And like, I think Jonathan Owens said, that's a weak ass snap count. And, because he's been doing this for a while. Hell, he heard Aaron Rodgers all those years he was in, Green Bay, or right here 1 year in Green Bay. He heard Jordan Love do it. He heard Deshaun Watson do it all the years he was in Houston. But there's like, it's things like that take a lot of time to master, that I believe when you can see him actually do that, if he's able to in a couple months, then you'll know, okay, when from point A to point F, that's how they got there.
Yeah. I love the banter too, because you can see, and there is a difference. There's a difference this season from last season with Justin Fields. With Justin Fields and DJ Moore as the leaders, they go off. I'm letting my actions talk. I'm not jawing back and forth. We off the vibes. It is what it is. The offense is slowly this season, just kind of like you saw a little bit like when Caleb throws the big pass down the sideline. I forget who ends up getting that one on the left side, but they catch it, big completion in 7-on-7. Caleb's down there doing a little flex and point. Yeah, I mean, there's a little jawing back and forth. And I'm like, okay, the offense showing a little bit of that fight, because D Walk is out there.
Yeah,
he never stops talking.
The defensive guys just love to talk, and I think that's what Eric Washington told us last week, is the saltiness about that group. They finished the year on a high note. They should be feeling good about themselves. Yeah. Like they're a unit that is in the same scheme now for multiple years. It's 3 years in total, even though, majority of these guys, I mean, outside of like Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon, the guys who came in 2022,
right.
Most of these guys have been in the scheme for at least a year or are in their second year. But that group does exude the confidence of a group that you would expect to, because they know they're good. They know that they have a scheme that fits them, and they know they have the players to execute it. That's important. And for the offense to have moments where they feel like they're matching that is probably a good sign that they too are willing to dish it out and play with some swagger and, feel like they accomplished something within all of that.
And again, no Keenan Allen.
Yeah.
I know when Keenan Allen gets here.
I'm sure.
He's going to be talking.
Yeah, I'm sure for a vet, that's going to be, for him too, to be integrated in all of this. He can kind of show and lead by example for the rest of the guys.
Oh yeah. It's going to be that's what I'm probably watching most as I head through mini camp and training camps, the wide receiver DB battles. Because I think there's going to be wars out there that are that's going to set this team up. I mean, I don't think that they'll see, at least not in the first 8 weeks of the season, a DB group anywhere close to what they have. So seeing how they match up, seeing how they attack the guys that they're practicing against is going to really set them up for this season.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's, the whole idea that this defense has got to prepare Caleb Williams for – week one, like what Kevin Byard told us last week. I think that they fully embrace that. And I know Tremaine Edmonds was asked about it today because it is important. Like your Mike linebacker and your quarterback, the type of mind games that the quarterback is going to try to play, like trying to move the guy out of the way effectively. That is not going to be seen anytime soon. It's not going to be seen really until they're in pads, but that's something that the responsibility on this defense and some of these defensive leaders to throw the kitchen sink at this guy to make sure, hey, you've seen everything. So you're not unprepared for what you may see in a game. That's critical. And I think a lot of them take that personally and are have a lot of pride in what their role is to bring him along.
All right, we got a lot to still get to. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave the 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. Let us know your thoughts on OTAs. Are you excited by what you're hearing, what you've seen? I'm sure the Twitter clips are flying. I'm sure that the Bears social media team is clipping up. If I couldn't see it from the vantage point. Did Caleb complete a Hail Mary to Roma Dunze on the right side? It's hard to see.
I saw somebody throw up their hand, like their arms, like a touchdown, but it was at the other end of the field, and from where we were, you're kind of blocked by the guys on the sideline. So it was difficult. I would love to see it if the Bears captured that and we could actually see what it was.
Let's get that play out there.
Yeah, without a pass rush though. Let's keep things in perspective.
There was no pass rush on that. That is facts. Let's keep this thing moving along, though, because the story that we didn't get to cover yesterday, that was the major news, and that we got to hear from a lot of the coaches, and I had forgotten Flus had gone through this, and Swift. Hard Knocks is coming, something that I'm going to be honest with you, Courtney, I thought I'd never see happen in the halls of Halas. I think a lot of us
felt like that, considering, what the official word from the team chairman has been repeatedly, that they don't really want to do Hard Knocks. And the thing is, the show's been going on since 2001. So that's a long time in the perspective of the entire, the Bears have obviously been in existence for over 104 years, but this show has had a lot of teams on it and a lot of repeat teams. I mean, we feel like Cleveland was one of the teams that we used to see a lot, but there's no team that is a better candidate for Hard Knocks than the Chicago Bears. And I think, with the league kind of forcing their hand in ways, and I don't know exactly how the conversations went down of how much they had to be look, well,
we know they don't want it here,
but that it is, they've been on record. George McCaskey has been on record saying, that they welcome the interest for the other teams. Now they can't escape it, and I feel like it's something they could lean into instead of trying to fight. The team always has editorial control over what gets out there and what doesn't. So anything they don't want out there, they can scratch, but it's a great opportunity when you have an international brand that's as strong as the Chicago Bears and the amount of eyeballs on this team for good reasons. Yeah. All good reasons. You have a number 1 overall pick. You have a team that finished last season on a positive note. You've got a great defense. You've got a lot of exciting new offensive players. What's not to want to put out there to try to help carry over the momentum from the offseason into the regular season. So I think everybody hit the right notes today in talking about Hard Knocks and knowing that there will be things that are captured that we don't end up getting to see because, that's the nature of the NFL and how they get the access to begin with, like HBO and NFL Films and being able to come into the building. But it is exciting for this fan base that's now going to have a chance to see something that they've never seen in training camp before with this team.
I thought what was interesting was when we got to hear from DeAndre Swift when he was on. He said they kind of painted him in a bad light. He didn't like how they put the contention between him and his coaches.
Sure.
When he was in Detroit. And I think that's going to be interesting because we kept hearing, "Oh, I love it. I'm excited about it." But there are people in the building that are disgruntled by some of the things that have been put out about them. I wonder if that's going to sway how much people are really giving them, how much access there's going to be. I mean, like, of course they're going to have access, but Hard Knocks is made by getting the characters, by building the people up, getting the storylines and all of that stuff. I wonder if there's going to be any pushback on that from some of the players in this building.
It's a good question because, like, who would those players be? Who would they feature? Because you're right. Like,
I know DJ just doesn't want to be bothered by it, probably.
I don't know, though. I feel like he'd be a great candidate for it. He's very good in front of the camera, and he's very receptive to it. He may act like what he was joking with us about last week, like how long it took to film the schedule video. DJ, among, like, as much as any other veteran player I've ever worked with, is very receptive to, being in front of the camera. And he's very comfortable with it, too. And I think he's been – he'll be a focal point, I would believe, of Hard Knocks because he went through it last year. He saw the transition at quarterback, and he has the institutional knowledge to know what this offense looked like, why it failed last season, and how this group is going to be different than that. I would think, like, some of the stories that, like, because Cap and Dion asked me this today, they're like, who's going to be the Hard Knocks breakout star? And I said Tevin Jenkins. I think of personalities and storylines. Great personality, first and foremost. Yes. Storylines abundant. He's in a contract year. He's somebody who, like, 2 years ago didn't know if he was going to get traded because he wasn't sure how the coaches felt about him. And, moving him from, like, offensive tackle, like left tackle, to right guard, like, all of those things that he's overcome within the last 2 years, he makes a prime candidate to be the person that, like, the national, international audience falls in love with because he's an offensive lineman. Right. That position lends itself to fans anyways. But I just think of, like, people who are personalities, like, who you would gravitate towards. I really hope they put him in a cool spot, like in a spotlight that we get to see his personality shine through. That would be good TV. Because what you don't want is, like, these boring, PR, like, sanitized storylines of things that, like, where players aren't being real. Nobody wants to watch that. And I think the reason Hard Knocks has been successful by and large is because they're able to cut through all of that and give you authentic, for as much as they can, like, authentic stories of these guys as they're going through the process of training camp.
That was the one word that we kept hearing get used today. And that does give me a little bit more hope because you get the ones where you're just like, okay, dude, you don't act like that. Like, there's no way you're doing this. I can tell by the people who are looking at you right now that they're confused by what you're doing. But the word that we kept getting was just be yourself, be authentic, be true to you. You're here to work. They're the cameras that are in the background, but you're here to work. And I don't know why, but, like, hearing that made me be like, okay, maybe this won't be as big of a distraction as most people usually attribute Hard Knocks to being on the outside looking in.
I don't feel like I feel like the last couple of years, like, the whole idea of it being a distraction, if it was, the team has control over what goes out and what doesn't. So they're not going to purposefully put out something that paints this group in a negative light. Yeah. And, I think the Bears are at a point in what they are as a franchise right now where they aren't concerned about the personalities that they have on this team, that it might go one way or it might go sideways, and that they would have that highlighted and it would paint them in a negative light. Like what Matt Eberflus said about Caleb Williams, who, this is the first time we'll see a rookie quarterback, number 1 overall pick on the show since Baker Mayfield did it in 2018. And that's, like, of course, there's a lot of scrutiny, a lot of publicity that comes with that, but it's nothing that Caleb hasn't seen before. I mean, the last couple of years, he's been in the spotlight in college football. And I think Flus, what he said was that he felt like he's going to handle it really well, that, he's, ready made for this more or less. It's not like you have somebody who's like never had a camera following them around before when, a lot of these guys now, I think it's going to be different in the era of like the QB1 show, not like that Caleb was in that, but like, you think about the guys who have had this access in high school, in college, and now in the NFL. I feel like guys are more prepared for it than maybe they were 10 years ago, even 5 years ago coming in.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely different. I mean, you got guys now who are shooting their own vlogs. Sure. You've got guys now who are documenting their stories
and who know how to capitalize on controlling their own narrative.
Yes, and I think that you look at 5-10 years ago, I mean, like, if you had a dude with a camcorder walking around, like, you were doing a great job. I love it. Yeah, I mean, like Jalen Johnson does that. Like, but like it's so, like, maybe not 10 years ago. Camcorder was crazy. That was I thought 2006 was 10 years ago for a minute there. Don't worry about that. I aged myself. But it's just such a different technological world now, and I think it's a world where almost everybody lives in this era of like, there's a camera somewhere.
Sure.
And so I think that does lend to the strength of it. Caleb being the first NIL player, the money that's already been
around. Sure that's going to come up
the cameras that have been around him, the money that's been around him, how he's going through his process. I think he's going to be fine. I will say this, my surprise darling of the show, I'm putting my money on this. I don't know if it'll happen, but Patrick Scales is such a bro. And he spends so much time just like I love watching. I should have become a long snapper, a kicker, or a punter. I just watch them on the sidelines, just like snap it, kick it. All right, let's watch practice real quick. And I'm like, dog, like this is the dream right here. Like,
yeah, I think people fall in line with long snappers because they feel like the closest we can get to like us normal people, like non-athletes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, I don't know if there's been a long snapper that people like Marquette King, or punter, that's probably the last one, which was the 2019 version when the Raiders were on it. And of course they had a whole circus going on that we didn't get to see on Hard Knocks. Remember Antonio Brown shows up and his feet are peeling and he came in the hot air balloon. Travis Smith was with the Raiders when that happened, when they were out in Oakland still, and he was telling us, like, kind of relaying that whole thing, that there was a lot you guys didn't get to see because they edited it out. And granted, I don't think Antonio Brown was there most of training camp, but we saw his peeling feet, and then we didn't see him again. And that was a huge storyline about, like, where is he during training camp? And those cameras didn't, that story was kind of swept under the rug, even though it was a huge part of that fabric of that training camp, which I would imagine if there was something that came up with that here, it would probably be the same.
Did he make it through preseason that year? He did, right?
He forced his way out at the 11th hour. I want to say it was it's 2019, right before cut down day. They released him. And then he got picked up by the New England Patriots.
That's right. That was such a weird time.
Yeah.
I mean, Antonio Brown is still a weird time. So I think that it's going to be interesting because it's such a big change for the Chicago Bears, showing so much. Mm-hmm. But they've kind of done something like this as well with how they've done 19-20 drives. So maybe it won't be as big of a deal for them. Maybe they'll be able to kind of just navigate through it. The part that I'm most excited to see, though, is the personalities of these young guys, the personalities of Caleb Williams, I'm gonna be real, the story of Caleb Williams, hearing his story from his dad and all of those things, all the different stories that come out. I think that he's no matter what side of the quarterback debate you're on, this kid left to go to another high school and live on his own.
Yeah.
That's insane.
And we've read about his story from the GQ article and from other publications that have gotten to do his come up story of how he got here. But the access that Hard Knocks will have will show you what is the rookie quarterback of the Chicago Bears living like in training camp. Obviously they'll be at the hotel, they'll be, kind of camped in, but I would imagine you'll get a chance to see what Caleb has done to set himself up for success in year one by which of his family members are around, during training camp, who's here, what is he doing recovery wise that might be different than other guys. I'm curious to see about what life is like for the number one overall pick, but also what life is like for the number 1 overall pick in a place like this. They're going to be the crowd shots of him, going and talking to the fans, and like just you'll get a sense to see, if you're not here living in it every day, how starved this city is for a franchise quarterback. And I'm curious, like, how do they show Caleb dealing with that? And like, are they going to try to insulate him from any of it by like not showing some of that? But like, what is that pressure like? Because you're going to see this team in the first episode's August 6th. You'll see them from the very beginning of training camp all the way up until cutdown day.
Yeah. It's going to be very interesting. I'm excited for it. Can't wait to get it, see everything that's going to come out. I'm trying to get myself in shape by then, just in case they catch a side angle with me on Hard Knocks. I'm going to be here. So, every now and then it's
Prepare
just like,
for the cameo.
Wow. They turn that camera and it's like, oh, wow, Pat, stand up straight. Like, there's going to be a lot of pressure on a lot of people in this building. Before we get up out of here, as we head into next week, where mandatory minicamp will be coming, what are you looking to see from the team? What are you looking to see growth-wise?
More of like the same of what I said with the offense. I think that you really want to get a feel. Like, you want the offense wants to end on a note where it's like there's not a lot of questions. I remember 2 years ago leaving mandatory minicamp, and it was like, all right, like, we're going to roll the dice when they get out there during training camp because it's a skeleton crew. It's not like that this year. You want to see which offensive linemen are practicing. I know Nate Davis was out today. Is he going to be out next week? Is he working through an injury? Little things, like, little, I mean, it's a big deal, but like, what Flus was saying today, that they are rotating their centers some. We are expecting it's Ryan Bates, the starter this year, not Coleman Shelton, but Coleman Shelton was getting most of this, like the quote unquote starting reps today.
Yes.
Like, do you have any more clarity on that? All the way up to, how does Caleb look getting in and out of the huddle? And I know that sounds so simple and it sounds cliche because that's what the coaches say, but it truly is. Like, are guys like lining up in the right place? Is he having, there were 2 delay of games today that we saw during team period. Are those things cleaned up? It's truly about the operation for me. So is this offense going into, like, when the vets leave, because the rookies and I believe probably a couple second-year players will have one more OTA that we're out at June 12th.
Right.
Like, how ready are they when they come back for training camp to be ready to like hit the ground running and start putting the pieces of the offense, like to start actually installing and getting ready for.
We'll see what it ends up being. I think there's of course there's a lot of buzz around Caleb Williams, but there's a lot of buzz around this Buzz team with Hard Knocks being here as well. So a lot of excitement all the way around. Courtney, appreciate you coming on as always. Good to see you in person for a pod. Once. It's been a little while.
Yeah.
It's been a little while. You guys let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page. Leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. For Courtney Cronin, it's your boy Pat the Designer, back at it again. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Bear down. Peace.